Good morning. Good morning and welcome to WACO. Let's get started, and we'll do Mr. Don Frolick, will you please lead us on the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Don. And anybody here for the first time that would like to recognize? Anybody here who has not been here for the last 6 months? Anybody's birthday? Divorce? Kids graduating from college? Okay. Well, I have some news. Mr. Don Frolick, our past chairman, has been reappointed to the Orange County Waste Management and Recycling Commission. And in fact, he was elected the vice president. So, congratulations, Don. Let's start in with our daily dose of aqua. Thank you.
Jose asked me to shorten my report. It's a little shorter. Anyway, with strong direction from Aqua, from our board and member involvement, we're asking everybody to get engaged in particularly the drinking water solutions for disengaged communities. I kind of broadened that because it's, well, I'll read first. Aqua is asking members to take specific actions to oppose a budget trailer bill that is proposing a state tax on drinking water and to continue to oppose SB 623, which is the Monning bill. The budget trailer bill is very similar to 623, and all of us getting involved is critical to this. I don't know that there's any other way to stop it. The Assembly Budget Subcommittee number 3 on Resources and Transportation will hear this budget bill, trailer bill, on Wednesday, March 14th. The Senate Budget Committee number 2 on Resources, Environment, Protection, Energy, and Transportation will hear it on the next day, March 15th. Some disadvantaged communities and low-income residents in some parts of the state really don't have access to safe drinking water. This is a social issue for the state. The intent behind SB 623 and the budget trailer bill is to fill gaps in funding for safe drinking water for such communities and their residents. Aqua agrees with the intent, but we strongly oppose the proposed tax on drinking water. We don't have taxes on our food. Why would we have taxes on our water? Instead, Aqua is advocating for a package of funds that is comprised of existing federal safe drinking water funds, general obligation bond funds, the assessments related to nitrate proposed in the budget trailer bill, and SB 623, and some funding from the state's general fund. We are requesting that all members, that means everyone here and everybody that you know, take actions immediately. First, join Aqua's coalition. Sign on the Aqua-led Oppose Unless Amended coalition letter if you have not already done so. The coalition February 6th letter and draft letter are available on Aqua's website. And I believe we've sent out alerts to everybody in San Diego and Orange County. So hopefully all of you have received something. If you have not, please tell me, and I'll make sure you get it. And then also, send a separate oppose unless amendment letters on behalf of your own agency. And then send letters to your local legislator. Please send them to senators and assembly members from your district and tell them your opposition. And then also, Orange County Water District is supporting an alternative to the tax on water, SB 623 in the budget bill, which is AB 2050, the Small System Water Authority Act, sponsored by Eastern Municipal Water District and CMUA. SB 2050 proposes to solve the problem of disadvantaged communities serving contaminated water, not by a new tax on water, but instead they propose mergers of non-compliant water systems into larger and more robust public water systems that can take advantage of economies of scale. So all of you think about it, see how that works for you. And then I'll end with some of our yes, please.
Is there a precedent in the United States for such a water tax? Is there any place else that has such a thing?
I don't know.
Well, I've heard that there is not. So
I've heard that too, but I can't say that with authority. I don't know. But this is California too. We tax any and everything. It is what it is. Okay, some of our upcoming events I'll go through real quickly. We just finished our Aqua DC conference. Just finished up. 2018 Aqua Legislative Symposium in Sacramento at the Sacramento Convention Center is taking place on March 14th. And if you're up there, you might want to stop by Resources Board. And then our spring conference will be in Sacramento, and that will be May 8th through May 11th. Hope to see y'all. Any other questions? Okay, thanks. Yes.
I'm just going back to the water tax. This is, water districts, enterprise districts are one of the few places that can raise rates to cover expenses. So if the state puts an expense on you, you have to raise the rates or you'll be legitimized in raising your rates to pay for it. They have a whole list of other things they want to tack onto it. It's just starting with disadvantaged communities. This is the camel's nose, the one that sounds the best. But they're out of money, and they have some serious problems, and they're coming for your money, and this is the way they're going to do it. So don't let them do this. This is a real serious thing. We've got to stop this. However we do it, we've got to stop this deal. So what Kathy's saying is absolutely right on. Everyone ought to get on the stick and get this, the letter sent and call on the phone and let them know how unhappy we are with this.
And this push is really serious. So you're not only getting it from Monning's bill, but we are also getting it from the governor's office with the budget trailer bill. So they're determined they're going to get it one way or another. So this is serious, and I don't know how we stop it any other way except to join together and just say no. So thanks for your support.
Kathy Green, everybody. I neglected to say her name first, but I presume everybody knows her name well. Now, to give us the status of the Metropolitan Water District, we have Director Larry Dick today.
Sure. Yeah, I know I'm not Linda. Announcements regarding activities at Metropolitan. I will say that one of your Metropolitan directors, Linda Ackerman, who normally is here, is not. She may not be because you ask about birthdays. Linda has the unique distinction of having been born on February 29th. So she's still a teenager. But she and her husband last night were at the Summit House in Fullerton, where Cal State Fullerton recognized a program from Cal State Fullerton about oral history. They recognized Wiley Aiken, Senator Ackerman, and T.J. Fuentes. It was a nice program, but as a result, I'm here and she's not. Probably still being interviewed by the press. I would add a personal editorial comment that I agree with Pierre and the others. This is the first step that we have to watch on this tax. Met is particularly concerned about that. As a personal remark, I will tell you that I used to drive by the river every day, and I still do, going to work, and I noticed that riverbed encampment. I don't know what the right answer is for those people. I know that they've moved them out now. I know that if they'd stopped the first one from parking along the right-of-way and camping there, that we wouldn't have had a second, and we wouldn't have had over 1,000. That's the thing we have to worry about on this water tax. It's going to come in small, and it's going to grow. And you're going to have no recourse but to pass it on to your ratepayers. And you're the one that's going to be on the front line, and you're going to change your role from moving water to being the tax collector and the tax banker to send it back to Sacramento. My apologies, and thank you for allowing me to give you my editorial remarks. We talked about the Metropolitan. I won't go into I already got so nervous about this, I've lost my paper. My goodness, what happened now? Ah, there it is. I'm going to lay off the first part of the month because by now it's old news. The meeting last week was basically talking about the budget. It's going up. However, part of that discussion has to do with we have some carryover from water use efficiency. When some people hear water use efficiency, they think of that. Others think of conservation. The conservation hawks have decided that that money that has not been spent should be rolled over and added to next year's budget. In most areas, when that happens, we carry those funds forward and put them in the reserves. There will be, I'm sure, some more robust debate on this next month. But just so you know how much it is, based on my back-of-the-envelope arithmetic, if we do not add the carryover to next year's already budgeted increased budget for conservation, we will not have to raise the rates at all. So it's going to be a balancing point, and stay tuned, we'll give you an answer on that. Part of the other discussion was about the ethics workshop. As you know, under state law, the ethics officer was created at Metropolitan. We have an opening now for an ethics officer, the other officer having led a very strong thrust for things ethical. There was basically a discussion between what is an independent officer. The ethics office thought the independent meant they should probably be outside in another building with their own investigators and their own opportunities to assess penalties and things of that nature. The upshot of that was we hired outside counsel, a gentleman that served with distinction under President Clinton, I believe, and also under one of the Republican administrations, and he has given us some good, clean advice on how to set up an ethics office that meets the requirements. Lastly, we're talking about the water fix. What a surprise. 1 tunnel or 2? 1 tunnel will probably provide us with approximately the same benefits as we had initially thought of for 2. On the other hand, the opportunity presents itself for Metropolitan to backstop that second tunnel financially. Is that an obligation we should take for the benefit of Southern California? I don't know. You have to talk about what happened when we built the Colorado River Aqueduct. We oversized that aqueduct because that's what Met does. They do really well on big projects. Don't ask them to build you a turnout. It'll cost about as much as paving Rhode Island. But on the big projects, they do well. And when they built that Colorado River Aqueduct with all that extra capacity, they had no idea why, but they just knew it was a darn good idea. We were already there, we had the right-of-way, and we had the shovels. Today, we are thanking the good Lord that we stood on the shoulders of giants and did just that. Because during the drought, when the state water project wasn't coming through, we were able to beg and borrow, I did not say steal, water, buy some, and we kept the aqueduct full, and it provided Southern California with that supply of water. Now we come to the State Water Project. Do we do the same thing? Do we go out on the hook? Do we make that second tunnel viable by funding it? If we do, how can we sell that water? To whom can we sell it? We have to be very careful because you remember we've been here in this room talking about the Imperial Irrigation. I can't talk. I get so excited about this. Tongue gets to the eye teeth. Can't see what I'm saying. The Imperial Irrigation District sells water to the San Diego Water Authority. But they need Met to get the water there because they can't mail it. FedEx doesn't deliver water. As a result of that, a lawsuit that has gone on for, I believe it is coming on 8 years, is that right? You're smart at this name. 8 years and many, many millions, we're talking tens of millions of dollars over how much we should charge for that. So if we do get the second tunnel, we do backstop it, we certainly want to hope and pray we get legislation in place that says this is how you can sell it and it is legal so to do. It would certainly provide an opportunity for us to take that superhighway we call the State Water Project that runs about it, thinking, we talked about it before, the 10-lane superhighway, turns into the 2-lane dirt road in the Delta, and then back to the 10-lane highway. It would give us a chance to get that 10-lane highway, moving water north to south, as my mother would say, the way the good Lord intended. Decisions are going to be made. If you have ideas, please talk to your managers. They'll carry those thoughts to the managers' meeting. Please talk to the members of the MODOC board and the Met directors. Thank you.
Well, the subject today is energy and the myth. And I was trying to recall the myth, but I don't have many. And I was asking Charlie Wilson, who seems to be a very, here you go, very successful person, and I'm asking him, what's the reason of your success? He said, well, I was in Edison. So there may be a myth there that people that goes to Edison gets a lot of money. I don't know. Could be that it's a very profitable agency, probably. The truth is that with the advance of solar energy, Edison has seen his energy sales down. In fact, the peak usage of energy has moved down to a certain other time. And however, they cannot let go. They have to be ready in case the clouds come in a no given time. And they have to produce the same energy that they would have done. So they're running a very expensive operation. So by providing alternative energy solutions, we are probably coping with some of the problems. So some myth exists, and they probably will be the right person to talk about it. And we have invited two speakers, one from Southern California Edison and one from the gas company. They will tell us what exactly happened and how they operate, especially as it relates to water, to the water district. So we have invited the person in Edison who deals with the water district, has to do anything with water. He is the manager. His name is James Pasmore, and he's a graduate from Calif State Fullerton. He has his bachelor degree there in 1997, and in 1998 he went to work for the big SCE. And hopefully he will clear up what kind of myth we have. James?
Good morning. All right. Well, once I came in this morning and I saw the auspicious heading of Uncovering Myths. So I'm not sure if my presentation will do that today, but I will do my best. What I'm basically going to talk about this morning is kind of set the stage for the kind of high-level strategic vision of where SCE is going over the next 5, 10, 15 years, which a lot of this is being driven by some of the state policy and greenhouse gas reduction, and then ultimately what kinds of things we are doing and working with our customers. And then towards the end, I'll kind of talk about a few specific things that are happening with some of our water customers, and then open it up for questions at the end of that. So make sure I can do this. So this is just, again, some of the brief stuff, a little about us, if you don't know. We, Southern California Edison, are the main electric utility for this part of the state. I didn't have notes on reading through some of these. So as you can see, we delivered about 87 billion kilowatt hours of electricity to our customers in 2015, representing a total of about 15 million people, 180 incorporated cities, 15 counties, 50,000 square miles of a service territory, approximately 5,000 of what we term large business customers, which includes most, if not a majority of the water sector and water agency customers in our service area, and approximately 280,000 small businesses. How do we do that? Over 12,000 miles of transmission lines, over 90,000 miles of distribution lines, over 1.4 million electric poles, 720,000 distribution transformers, and a little under 3,000 substation transformers. All sounds really nice and interesting, but then that just kind of gives you like a strategic, kind of like a nuts and bolts of who we are and how we get the power to our customers. I want to talk really briefly just about some of the past climate policies that have gotten us where we are currently, and then most of the rest of my talking is going to be about our future, how we're going to get there, what kinds of strategic things we're looking at, and again, how we're going to be working with our customers so we can get there together. One of the big things I just want to highlight on this slide is AB 32. And of course, that was to achieve 1990 greenhouse goal levels by 2020. That's the main takeaway I wanted to show from this slide. This kind of shows what's been happening since 2000 up until current, which gets us to about 2017. The next slide talks about what's happening for us in the future, looking out to obviously 2030 is a key date and also 2050. SB 32 is the main point that's kind of driving most of the strategic decisions that we're making at Southern California Edison currently. And just to refresh everyone, SB 32 calls for state greenhouse goal reductions, calls for a 40% reduction from those 1990 levels by 2030, and then a step beyond that, an 80% reduction by 2050. So that kind of sets the stage, okay? So here is a kind of like a dissection of the various emission contributors that we have. So if we look at each economic sector to see what's contributing the most to greenhouse gas emissions, it helps us understand where we should focus so we can make the greatest impact at the lowest possible cost. Obviously, looking at the chart, the main thing that jumps out to everybody is the transportation sector, followed by the electric sector. 39% of energy usage is for transportation, and just under 20% is electric power. So we can't go to any one of these particular sectors and say, hey, no more usage for you guys, no more carbon, we got to cut you guys off. Doesn't really work. So we have to find another way. So it's unfair to kind of force one particular sector to start using less or start imposing some restrictions on one sector, because then, as we all know, it's a zero-sum game. Another sector is going to have to pick up those kind of reductions and figure out how we get there. So what Edison has come up with as a result of this greenhouse gas policy is an integrated solution, what we call, it's our clean electric pathway. We have actually published a white paper that came out last year. I do actually have just a few hard copies with me today that I'm happy to leave behind, but I will provide everybody with a link so you can download this if you haven't already seen it. It will speak to most of the talking points that I'm going through today. It gives a really good overview, a synopsis of, again, how we got here, where we see us going, and how we're going to get there. So we're going to basically focus on three different areas. The first is decarbonizing, what we call decarbonizing the electric sector. Number two is the electrifying of basically is the electric transportation sector, and then the building electrification, which I'll speak to a little bit. So what do we mean by decarbonizing the electric sector? So what we're focusing on there is looking for more renewable sources of generation to be able to pass on to our customers. Currently, if you look at the Edison portfolio mix of generation that we procure to provide to our customers, about 40% of our portfolio comes from renewable: wind, hydro, solar, etc. So by 2030, the goal is to get us on this generation piece. We're looking to get to 80% carbon-free resources, which is going to basically have us go out and procure new contracts for solar, wind, hydropower, other zero-emission generation sources, along with battery storage, which we are just kind of starting to see come into its own. We're starting to see a lot more battery storage technology in the distributed generation side at the customer level. Some of what we're talking about here is large-scale wholesale type stuff. So the next piece I want to talk about is something we're seeing a lot of push behind, is the transportation electrification. Why? Obviously, as you saw from the pie chart a couple of slides back, it represents the largest electric usage in the state currently. It represents about 39% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So by 2030 in California, the goal is to have 7 million personal electric vehicles on the road. We are currently at about 300,000 today, if the statistics I'm looking at are accurate. Medium and heavy duty trucks are also going to be part of that equation. That's going to be crucial because the trucks disproportionately currently affect our air quality. Auto industry is already seeing the electric future. We're seeing Mercedes, Volvo, GM, Volkswagen, and Jaguar have committed to either electrify their entire fleet vehicles, or we're starting to see hybrid options from those manufacturers. Another interesting thing is we are also starting to see cities create new policies to reduce gas-powered vehicles. Paris and Los Angeles being examples, committing to a ban in areas of each city by 2030. But again, going back to the 7 million cars figure, the main thing, of course, that we need to think about is, well, we're going to need a lot more charging stations than what we have right now. Some of the biggest deterrents, it seems, from people that are looking to move into an electric vehicle is the range anxiety. It seems to be number one or near the top of the list for customers that don't want to purchase an EV or something like that. I personally don't have one yet, but I'm still thinking about it. Quick poll of the audience. EVs, how many?
In the family, we have several, including rooftop.
Very good. So the thing is, yeah, it's out there, it's coming, and we're probably going to see more and more of that down the road. Speaking specifically to this sector, in January, 2 months ago now, the CPUC did approve a pilot program that SCE had applied for back in 2017. It's an electric transportation pilot that's going to be able to allow us to increase and offer incentives to certain targeted sectors with our customers to basically increase charging infrastructure. Now, I will say that we don't have anything specifically carved out in that pilot program for the water sector yet, but it's coming. So there's 4 key areas that this particular pilot is going to cover. Off the top of my head, I know one of them is Port of Long Beach, and that's going to be addressing some of their port vehicles, their light and medium duty. Also destination centers, so shopping centers, malls, things like that. We're going to start seeing a bigger push, and you're going to start to see more deployment and installation of charging infrastructure in those types of centers. So the pilot just got approved a couple months ago. We're going to see development of those pilots and probably start rolling those out to those particular customer sectors late 2018 into early 2019, and obviously how well those pilots do in each of those sectors is going to inform the next iteration. Okay, was this successful? What did we learn from it? What do we do next? Who are the other business sectors that we want to go after? And so, again, for the water sectors, we're looking to you guys down the road. We're going to be coming to you saying, hey, we've got programs, or we're going to have a pilot that may target your sector, whether it's going to be, say, the public sector or water agencies specifically, or something specifically that's going to look at maybe medium and light-duty fleet vehicles. There definitely will be something coming. So stay tuned, and I'll continue to keep everybody informed as we move forward on those kinds of initiatives. Other good news is that we're starting to see other industries start jumping to make this happen. British Petroleum, for example, is talking with automakers to install chargers at their gas stations. I also understand that Shell is also doing something similar at their sites. This is happening in Europe, but again, we're hoping to start seeing some of those methodologies transfer over to the United States and more specifically to California. I'll touch briefly on building electrification. Obviously, we're mainly water districts. We're thinking in terms of pumping and infrastructure and storage and turnouts and things like that. But we've all got office buildings that we have to operate and maintain. So the main takeaway that I want everybody to leave with on this point is don't ignore the low-hanging fruit. Continue to take a look and invest in those energy-efficient technologies for the office building space. Look at the building envelope. Look at the lighting. Look at how HVAC technology continues to improve and strengthen. And again, all of these things tie together to help us reduce the greenhouse gas measures. If you go back several years to the I think it was the California Energy Commission the state loading order, number one at the top of that list is energy efficiency, then demand response, then distributed generation, and then finally, where it makes sense, cost-effective, renewable generation resources. So energy efficiency, demand response, those continue to remain the least cost avoidance investments that customers can make, whether you're a water district or a city, a public agency, office building, school, doesn't matter. So we still want to continue to encourage and develop programs around these kinds of things to be able to help you to reduce the GHG, because obviously that helps all of us. This slide I actually pulled in from another presentation. This just I'm not going to spend any time on this. This simply kind of re-summarizes some of the information that I was talking about earlier that kind of shows just where we're going and how we got here. So I'm going to shift a little bit because I was asked to cover something. We've been hearing the 19% number for a long time, right? 19% of the electric energy consumed in California is used for water. So what does that actually mean? So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time. I got a couple of slides that speak to that. So this slide is a few years old, but I know these percentages have shifted a little bit, if I understand correctly. But what we're trying to say here is that of the total energy used in the state of California, roughly 19% of that energy is for water-related use, conveyance, treatment, storage, pumping, etc. And about 32%, at least according to when this study was done, represents the natural gas. So maybe Ranjiv, I don't know if that number has shifted a little bit or if it's still roughly the same. Pretty much the same. Okay. So one of the things I was asked to talk about is, well, we can't, what does that 19% really, really mean? Okay, let's break that down a little bit so it kind of makes things a little bit more clear. So let me see. Here's how the 19% breaks down when we kind of look at the various energy usage within that 19%, if everyone is still with me. So what we're basically saying here, if we look at the summary episode, 19% of electricity can be tied to water in the state of California. Approximately 7 to 8% of that, depending on what year you're looking at the statistics, is the water sector itself. It's the treatment and the conveyance and the pumping, storage, all that kind of stuff. The other 11%, what we call water users, that's end use. So that's a pretty big number that's going, that there's a lot of water use there. Yes?
Clarification on the water. What about the conveyance system that brings the water into Southern California through the state water project?
I think they're still capturing most of that, from what I understand, is in the 8% figure. Yes. Yeah, that's right. That would be the blue piece. So now you may look at the total pie chart and say, gosh, well, only 2% of that 19% is for water treatment. And like, well, what can we really do, or what kind of impact do we really have there? Well, it's not a small number. 2% may not sound like a lot, but I took some couple of notes. Just from Southern California Edison's perspective, if we look, and I tried my best to kind of isolate looking at the various business sector codes. If we look at the water sectors, usage in 2017. It was represented about 633 megawatts of usage and about 1.7 it's 1.7 gigawatt hours of usage. And that's so basically you can say that 2% represents those numbers from Southern California Edison's perspective. Yes, Pierre?
That pie chart that you have up, pie chart of the 8%, right?
This is the 19%.
It can't be, because supply and conveyance is not that much.
You know, and I do admit that this is a couple years old, but I was told that this was representing the 19%. So, if that's,
it does not have the water users. Where are the water users?
you know, and I think too what they did, Pierre, is they may have put that segment in the supply and conveyance, but that doesn't quite translate if you look up there. So I'm going to need to do some drilling down on that.
It's so large is that the transport, as the gentleman just pointed out,
Yeah.
coming down, there's Edmonton power plant that picks up the water over the grapevine. That's a huge plant, it's huge.
Okay, so we're saying that is in that blue. Okay, does that help, Pierre?
1460 megawatt pumps there.
Okay.
The 11% users, going back to the top left, the 19% electricity, the 11% is not included in that graphic.
Right.
That's a graphic of the water sector.
Just the 8%?
Of just the 8%.
Okay, okay. Then thank you for that correction, Pierre.
And if you do the same thing in natural gas, you'll find it's 1%.
Okay. But again, what we're trying to illustrate here is from Southern California Edison's perspective, it's a big figure, so there's a lot of energy efficiency opportunities that we can leverage, and we can still make a difference working with our customers to achieve reductions in these particular areas. One other thing that I was asked to touch on is the wonderful duck curve. Everyone's heard about the duck curve? Okay. So what is the duck curve? Well, this basically talks about how the increased installation and presence of behind-the-meter distributed generation, like solar, is driving down the demand curve during the daytime. So what you're seeing is the overgeneration risk if you look at the first lower part of the graph when the load starts to dip down very, very low. And then consequently, we have the exact opposite problem now, which is getting pushed into the early evening. When that solar resource drops off, now the utilities are seeing a significant ramp up to be able to meet what that peak load is to pick that back up. So as we're continuing to see more and more investment in renewables, particularly solar, the risk is that we're going to continue to see downward pressure on that demand curve. That's going to cause some system reliability issues on the grid, and so there's some opportunities for the utilities to work with customers to find a couple of ways to how we tackle that problem. Previously, before we had such a significant presence of renewable resources, we were only focused on the other side of that thing. We had that huge hump in the middle of the day, and we were always asking customers, what can you do to curtail load and take things off of the system? What can you shut down? What can you dial back? What can you shift to other time periods? And that became the advent of some of our demand response programs over the last, maybe 8-10 years. So this is an example of a wholesale price curve for looking out a few years in the future. It's done just for illustrative purposes, but you'll see two different things and two different reasons why these are highlighted. And this kind of ties back into this curve. So on the overgeneration risk, what ends up happening is you've got generators that are trying to push generation out onto the grid. Their commodity all of a sudden is either at near zero price or it's below zero price. And they're thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? Do I want to shut down? From a reliability standpoint, it doesn't really work that well to do that. These you're talking about generation plants, they're really not meant to turn on and turn off. When they're turned on, they want to just run. So there's some financial opportunity there for the utilities to work with our customers. This is going to be something new that we're going to be developing over the next couple of years to address that. So basically now we're in the opposite type of a problem, where it's like, well, no, we don't need any load in the system. Now, for those times of the day, we're actually trying to figure out what models, what programs can we develop for customers to say, hey, we need load. What can you turn on? What can you run? What kind of resources can you put on the system so we can help maintain system reliability, and we'll pay you for that. So those are the kind of things that you're going to start seeing being developed at the utility level over the next couple of years, probably both in the retail market and in the wholesale market, okay? The few hours of the year likely to have the high energy prices. We've already seen some success in ways that we're tackling this with our traditional demand response programs. Hey, we'll pay you to curtail load. So those kinds of things are still going to exist because we're still going to have to tackle that ramp in the afternoon. Or now it's going to be in the early evening. Yes, question in the back.
With respect to that duct curve, do the time of use premiums on your electric bill still reflect the old curve? In other words, is the time of use penalty still in the middle of the day?
Excellent question. Excellent question. You were actually like reading my, I don't have a slide on it, but what's coming? Anybody know what's coming in the spring of 2019? New time of use periods throughout the state, for all the state utilities, for Southern California Edison, San Diego, and PG&E. So we've all been, the last 30 years, we've all had noon to 6, at least for all the Southern California Edison folks, drilled into our heads as the on-peak period during the summertime. Well, now that's going to be 4 to 9 p.m. starting next year. So you're right, that this curve is more following the current demand curve. It'll be very, very interesting to, at least to see from a price response standpoint how much the new TOU period pricing may shift what we're already seeing in the duck curve. Because now the customers will be incentivized to use less from that 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. We're going to have to see where that goes. We're starting to do some modeling on that, but we won't really have any idea probably until closer to the end of this year. And as far as the rates themselves are concerned, we're going to start doing some forecasting and modeling for all of our assigned customers probably in third quarter of 2018. So your various account managers and account representatives at Edison that you work with will start being able to meet with you or whoever they meet with at your staff at the staff level at each of your agencies to be able to start telling you, okay, in 2019, based on your current operations, here's how these new rate time periods are going to affect you, and you can start making some decisions about what flexibilities you guys may have to do some load shifting. Yes, question.
How much are you expecting the residential rate to change in that period?
I apologize. I haven't been following the residential side. I've mainly been focused on what's happening on this sector. That's something I can certainly check, and I can get an answer back out to the rest of the group. Yes, in the back.
Well, why don't you just go ahead and do that now? I mean, obviously, it's why wait another year?
PUC. The PUC. Well, first, it's a very long. Yeah, it's a very long iterative process. The PUC did finally approve that, but yeah, the rates are supposed to be implemented in the spring of 2019. Yes.
What impact will the battery storage have on that peak?
We'll have to wait and see. I don't know. Not specifically. I don't have enough of a granular view by technology at this point to see how that may impact customers.
At my level, I'm interested in the residential costs.
Okay.
My city's costs, to the larger companies, I don't have any input.
Right.
But I'd like to some information on residential.
Okay, I'll see if I can find some information on that and get that back to the rest of the group. Yes?
You talk about electric vehicles.
Yes.
And they always talk about charging stations. I agree, there aren't enough of them around. Where's the electricity get from? That's an enormous generation capacity. And I question whether you have guys really have it.
Well, that's one of the things that we've been doing as part of our infrastructure upgrade. That's something that we've been looking at long term because obviously, if you go back, say, 20 years, everybody had one TV or like one or two TVs. They only had this. And now you look at home usage loads. Now, there's a TV in everyone's got a flat screen plasma in every room. There's, you've got cable boxes, you've got satellite, you've got all these additional devices, you've got a Wi-Fi, you've got so many more things that are increasing the individual house residential load, it's a much, much different picture than what it looked like 20 or 30 years ago. So we've been forecasting ahead. A lot of the, how many of you guys know about the infrastructure system replacements that have been ongoing for the last several years? What you've seen is a really, really big push from Edison over the last maybe 5 or 6 years to slowly replace and upgrade aging infrastructure or undersized equipment within our system. It's to make our system more robust, to make it more intelligent, so that in the event that there are outages in the future, something as simple as a car hit pole, we are able to more locally isolate the area, get the problem fixed, so fewer and fewer customers are impacted. So part of that infrastructure replacement goes to that point as well. We're aware that we're seeing residential usage increase. Customers that have EVs now have charging stations in their garages or attached to their homes as well. So all of those kinds of things are being factored into these decisions in this long-term strategic view that Edison has. So yes.
I did a rough calculation. You went on your transportation thing, and based on what I understand, kilowatt-hour charge required for the electric vehicle, we'll be talking 70 million kilowatt-hours additional load. That you're going to need to generate.
Yeah. And I think some of the figures that I gave, depending upon what we're looking at, either at maybe at the state level, not the SCE level, but yeah, I agree. It's a huge number that we're going to have to raise. Well, I think that goes back to some of the future investment in more renewables to be able to get us there. So yes, there's another question over here before I move on. I thought. Oh, yes, Pierre.
Jim, could you go back a slide? Okay, you see the bottom of the duct curve in 2020 is about 12,000 megawatts?
Yes.
Okay, this is in March. There are times when you're spilling electrons out of the state or giving them away because you've got about 12,000 or 13,000, permanent kilowatts being generated from your combined cycle and other things, and that you can't turn off. So those electrons are just wasted during certain hours of the day. You're trying to match them up, so you can, not spill them out and get them in a place that either charge the vehicles or whatever, so you don't waste them, and it offsets, the impact of demands during the ramp-up period. Okay, so, and the combined cycle generation is more efficient than the peaker plants?
Yeah, I think so, yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay, no question.
Okay.
Just clarifying that there's a problem with spilling
All right, and the last thing, I think this is my last, the last thing I wanted to touch on briefly, this gets a little bit more focused, because one of the other things that I was asked to cover is, gosh, we heard songs shut down at the end of 2013, I believe, so what has Edison been doing about that? Well, we haven't been ignoring it. In fact, we've been focusing on that long before, during the whole time we had that issue happening, probably the beginning of 2013. So at the time, we launched something called the Preferred Resources Pilot, or PRP. Like your industry and ours, we love to use a lot of different acronyms. So from now on, I'm going to call it PRP. Hopefully you'll remember what I'm talking about. But the PRP basically was a holistic look at the central and southern Orange County region to try and say, okay, with this generation resource now gone from the mix, what does that do to grid stability on the distribution system? What challenges is Edison going to face, not just in being able to provide power to the customers, but in areas where we're going to continue to see load growth and new businesses being built and houses and infrastructure, wastewater treatment plants expanding or building new pumping facilities, et cetera. How do we match that demand with that song's resource now gone? So the PRP had looked at several things. I mean, it looked at some of just even the really basic traditional things. Increase incentives for customers that are in what we defined in that region. to kind of say, oh, okay, we usually pay this incentive rate for this particular program. Let's increase it for customers that are in the PRP area. So we can tackle low-hanging fruit. We can encourage more investment in energy efficiency. So customers are efficient all the time. Demand response. You know, we increased some of the incentives on the demand response program side, and then at least myself personally, we were able to become engaged with one of our strategic partners, which is I'll call out Irvine Ranch Water District. We've been working to develop several different traditional energy efficiency and demand response projects, and some outside of the box ideas that we've been working on for the last maybe 2.5 years. So we're continuing to work together to try and find interesting in different ways, whether it's load shifting or increased incentives. We're looking at potentially the ideas of doing some pilot studies on some water storage and being able to take the pumping that's associated to refill that particular storage reservoir different times of the day with new TOU periods coming on. How can we make that benefit the grid? And then the basic idea is, once we've studied and piloted some of these things in this PRP region, other parts of our service territory have other types of constraints and issues as well. You know, they've got their own unique, different set of circumstances depending upon how the distribution is fed in those particular regions, et cetera. So how can we extrapolate what we learn as part of this pilot that we're doing in this area, not just with Irvine Ranch, but with other strategic partners and other commercial and industrial businesses, and translate that to the rest of our business sector. So that's some of the stuff that we are working on a more like customer level. So we're kind of looking at everything. So with that concludes. I want to be sure I don't use up any more of Ranjiv's time. And thank you very, very much.
Now remember the myth is 19% of the energy is used by water. Still is. Now I'm very impressed with the 80% target for renewables by Edison. That's a good target. Now, before I introduce the next speaker, I remember back in the mid-90s when the concept of delivering water changed from being an engineering company to resource management. That's when the Metropolitan Water decided to do the IRP, the Integrated Resource Management Program. In 1992, I remember, we had a program that provided subsidies to agencies developing projects that will desal brackish water. We were approached by the gas company. This is 26 years ago. They wanted our help, so we provided them the big database that we had of potential projects, potential agencies doing projects, because they had the idea of bringing gas, natural gas, to the agencies, so they developed their own. They would generate their own energy on site, and that would be cheaper. I don't know how that worked at the end with the air quality. However, during the years, and in 2005, I managed Metropolitan's CII program, which is the Commercial, Industrial, and Conservation Program. And we went around the agencies providing incentive and teaching them and developing new products that would say water, energy efficient water efficient. And we had to partner with agencies like Edison and the gas company. So the products that we have in our kitchen now are efficient, both water and energy efficient. In those days, when I met Ranjiv, who is the manager of the commercial industrial program for the gas company, and we coincide in many places showing our product or our programs. And one of the reasons that we invited him is because the gas company has been involved in this kind of program strongly lately to help minimize the energy consumption. And again, parallel to that goes with the water savings. So Ranjiv Goonetilleke, and forgive me if I kill your last name, but Ranjiv is a principal engineer with the gas company, and he manages the commercial, industrial customer service program for them. I know Ranjiv is, I don't have your bio, but I know you graduated from University in London, your bachelor's, and anything else you will have to tell us. Ranjiv?
Thanks very much. I suppose, firstly, thank you, Jose, for that. I've been with the gas company, I think, about 16 years now. And before that, had an engineering career in nuclear power and water pumping. It's interesting that I don't know what we can do in 20 minutes, but I'll try. And first of all, before we get started, thank you very much for taking the time to be here and to hear this stuff. Hopefully, it'll just get you thinking. I wanted to introduce the gas company's public affairs manager, who was instrumental in getting me here, Emily France. And anytime you want to talk to the gas company, you need to call that lady over there, and she'll get you there, right? Because otherwise you get lost in the thing. Also, what you just heard from James pretty much covered what I'm going to say, except that I'm on the gas side. One of you in the audience asked, where does the electricity come from? 60% of it comes from natural gas, right? So the electric generators are using a lot of it right now. Let's just go on. So I'm going to just talk a little bit, basically the same outline. I don't know how we managed to do that, but it's the same update. Talk a little bit about your programs that we have, and then the water energy nexus a little bit, and what we're doing. I'm not going to labor these. You can read the slides. So power gen incentives, these are all the things that we do to encourage the use of gas and to manage the use of gas. It's gone past either or. It's both, and it's also solar, and it's wind, and it's geothermal, and it's also the energy that we have in hydraulics, water tumbling down a hillside, and the potential energy, the kinetic energy in that, bring it back into energy that you can use. Edison just showed you who they are. We pretty much mirror them. You don't need all the little numbers, but there's 21 million customers that we're covering in these 500 communities. I'll just skip that. And just, if you've got a question, please feel to interrupt and ask, because it's a lot better than me just talking at you. Where does it all come from? Those places that you say, that's where the gas is actually coming out of the ground. So now we're talking about natural gas, and it's CH4. And as you can see, the H is what gives you the heat. The hydrogen gives you the heat. The C goes along, the carbon goes along for the ride, and it grabs a little of the oxygen in the air, that combustion air, and that's the CO2 part, right? If it's not completely burned, it's carbon monoxide, and then it becomes poisonous. So that's where the sources are. There's a little bit in California, as you can see up in Monterey, the Monterey Shale. And I won't labor the rest of them, but the Bakken Shale up there is the big one that's been boosting it. This is the pricing. Go ahead. Good. Yes, please. That's what we want.
CH4?
Yeah.
The big product that comes out of it is water vapor.
Yes, because the H grows in it, and that grabs the oxygen, so it makes H2O. Great?
Relatively clean.
Right. And, of course, water vapor in itself is also a greenhouse gas, okay? Right. So we can't do all this in the 20 minutes, but those are great. And anybody else who has comments to make or questions to ask, please interrupt, because it's very important that people understand just those basics, that it's carbon and hydrogen, but what gives us the energy is the hydrogen. That's why Schwarzenegger went after hydrogen highway, And maybe one day it's going to be that, because then you're taking away this emission part that comes with the carbon. The pricing, as you can see, the center black line, that's the reference price. And what's interesting about this is we're here at the beginning of that vertical black line, but as you go along, that's 2050. We're saying that if you had a low oil price or a high oil price, that reference price in the middle is still very stable. There'll be momentary ups and downs, but because of other events that happen. But that price is around that $6, if you like, gas price, right? That's a decatherm. So we think it's going to be below that. Right now, today, it's $2.40. It'll probably rise a little bit while that line goes up. Any questions? Just please feel free to ask. So that's basically where the pricing of natural gas is. And as long as natural gas stays like that, then of course electricity will, that's the underpinning of electricity in the country, right? Where does that all come from? There's the pictures, right? So it's the shale gas and the Alaskan gas up there that's feeding it, right? And the new technologies, and we won't get into the fracking and all of that produces all of this. Right? We're talking about the reserves are projected at 300 years, so none of us will be here, right? But whether you're going to use it or you're going to keep it in the ground is another debate that goes on, right? And whether you can use it sustainably from other sources, because essentially you're trying to get to a hydrogen atom, right? That'll give you the energy. This is from EIA and the outlook. It basically says that by 2017, we already have got to the point where we got plenty of gas. We don't need to bring it in from outside anymore. And the strong growth in the production, it talks about there about 2020. We've got, and by 2030, I do believe we're going to probably, there it is on that first bullet, and it talks about the end, by 2030, for the first time, there won't be any imports of energy into this country, right? We'll be actually a net exporter. What does this do to the price of electricity? You can see it there. If you look at 2017, it's out that to compare the two, you have to take it down to millions of BTUs, so that electricity is around that $20 range, and natural gas is down at that $5 range. That's actually fat because it's lower than that, right? But that's these are projections. Any questions now? All right. So now we come to the. I know it's an update. If you have a question, go ahead and ask. Yeah.
I thought you were already using Aliso Canyon.
Yes, so we're going to just, so it is safe. It's been determined to be safe, but it has constraints on it. That's what, so it's not back to normal yet, and it won't be, right? So just as it says there, the protocols for withdrawals, and it's also being treated as an asset of last resort, right? So it's only right now, just these last 5 days, we're in a curtailment. And if you can see here, SoCalGas is managing these outages, right? And just like electric brownouts, we're going through that, but fortunately, it hasn't impacted you. So the people it has impacted is the electric companies who are the top of the list to get cut down, right? And they have that issue going on right now. That's what our account managers are heavily involved in, trying to keep them going, but at the same time, the individual homes, I think the next slide shows it, that's our priorities, that core, as we call it, the core customers will be supplied. It's there that due to its size and location, Aliso Canyon actually is the big balloon, right? When there's any cold spell or a hot spell, that's where that gas would come from. Unfortunately, now they are using the other storage. There are 3 other storage fields, and those are getting used and cycled a little more than they would have normally. So all of these have complications and nuances that have to be taken care of. Sure.
So you use the gas storage fields to balance because the pipelines that bring gas from the major gas producing regions were not sized large enough. Because there was a belief at some point in time that the gas supply from those regions would decrease. So you take it in, put it into storage, and then smooth out demand.
So that's how it's done. You're absolutely on the right path. The gas storage is a balloon, right? That there is obviously a smaller version of that balloon in the volume that's in the pipelines, but we're going down 8,000 feet and under the cap rock, you can store gas, and that is being put into the strata down there that was evacuated of all its oil in the old days. So these are all old oil wells that are stored, and that works fine, except for the misfortune that we had 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago when we leaked.
So as I understand, the gas lines coming across Arizona are larger than the ones coming into California. There was a decision that was made. Is there any, expectation that you're going to parallel those gas lines so you can bring more of the gas in?
We are, and of course, as you know, the governor's office today is trying to move you away from increasing natural gas usage, right? So there's a balancing act that's going on there.
If I could just add a reminder that natural gas in the pipeline moves very slowly. So it's not necessarily just pipeline capacity, and you just saw from the last slide too that about 90% of our production comes from out of state. So what Aliso Canyon does for us is allow us to store 90% of our supply in a pipeline that's moving 5 miles an hour. It gives us local control, essentially.
It's actually very parallel to the delivery of water, right? So, this is the storage. And it's like if we took away Lake Skinner, or if we took away Lake Matthews, or one of those local storage places, you'd have a lot of problems because you'd have to increase the velocity of flow, which you're not going to do. And then there are other things that happen, and that is that the conduits breach at some point. And when that happens, now you got a real serious problem. And I threw that in because that question had been asked about the lines and what's going on. Well, they had some planned outages, and then they had an unplanned outage. And so that's what's causing the stress right now.
There was a project in Long Beach to build a port to bring liquid. LNG. Right. Yeah. Is that from where and what is
okay, I'm going to go off script here for a minute. Just because you hear a lot about LNG, right? And liquid natural gas is if you take gas and you cool it to minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit, which is colder than somewhat, and it becomes a liquid, and the reduction is 600 to 1. So for 1 cubic foot of 600 cubic feet of gas, it's got 1 cubic foot of liquid. Right now, in the port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, there are trucks that are loaded with this liquid, and they actually are putting liquid natural gas on the other trucks, and this is one of the ways of cleaning up the air. Just as James pointed out, the mobile sources is what they have to target, because they've got everything else down. Now they're coming after people's barbecues and the beach. They're trying to just lower the criteria pollutants.
There's no free lunch there either. Those are doers, and cryogenic temperatures have to be maintained, and you're getting oil off.
Well, it's very so. If you really, I think it's a great idea to go look at this stuff. I have, right? And boron is where the natural gas is actually clean energy makes it into LNG, and they cool it down, and once it's in the truck, if it's pretty heavily insulated, so it stays as LNG. There is a boil-off, and that pops and allows that gas to go out, right? But that's a very slow process. So you get a 50,000 gallon truck, and it goes down and parks there. It's there for a few days, right? Now, the plant that the gas company is owned by Sempra Energy, and they have a plant in the just down Rosarito Beach area, and that was built as a plant to import gas as LNG, and then the LNG would be boiled off and it'll be natural gas, and it'll come up a pipeline into this area. Well, the opposite is going to happen, right? So they've now put in the freezing equipment that they need to cool it down there, and that's what we're talking about exporting. The world price of gas is around about $7.50 a decatherm, and we're paying $2.35 right now in California. So there's a big advantage to that. It's about, the difference between taking gas, converting it into electricity, and then getting the energy back out. There's about a 60% difference in that price, okay? So if you can use it directly, that's why you pipe it right to your cooking at home. We're cautious but optimistic that we can maintain service to our core customers this winter, and I just put in that sentence there that unplanned events do occur, right? SoCalGas's primary obligation is to its residential and small industrial customers. The big guys are sophisticated enough to manage their own thing, but starting with the electric generators, they're the first ones to get cut, right? And then it comes down through the refineries, large industrials, and then finally, if it comes that far, it'll come to commercial. Now, at that point, obviously, Aliso Canyon will be released to operation. That's what that meant by a last resort facility.
So wait a minute. So you're going to cut the generators before
Will they cut right now? Today?
So you're going to cut them. So we're relying on their energy to run things. So if you cut them, we don't get the energy that the governor is pushing us to use instead of gas.
You get it?
That's great. This really makes lots of sense here. But do the the electric companies have their own separate gas lines? So are they connected to El Paso natural gas and everything?
It comes down, they are buying capacity on our lines, but because that's the cheapest part of it, they get cut first. That's the way the CPUC has it all arranged. But they have other sources. Last and not least, James didn't really expand on that, but everybody's hoping for large electricity storage. Electricity has to be used the moment it's generated, right? But they're talking about storage. Now, we're not the electrochemical batteries that we're talking about. We've gone from lead acid to nickel metal hydride to lithium ion, but there are big flow batteries that are not inside a little plastic box. These are huge things that actually will electrochemically keep electricity and then discharge it when it's needed, because you're storing it electrochemically. There are other ways of storing it, pumped storage. I think all of you are fairly sophisticated, so you know the different ways it can be done. There's a very novel thing that the gas company is focusing on now, and it's called power to gas, where they actually use the electricity to create gas, right? And so that's being worked on. There's a lot of work being done. It's probably coming. It's downstream. Any other questions? No. James touched on this, the 33% 2020 solar, right? Geothermal, landfill gas. Now, so those are the alternate sources of that same CH4 molecule. The CH4 molecule can come out of the ground. It's the old dinosaurs down there, and that's what we're getting down and what we term natural gas. This is the alternates that we have, right? So we got small hydro, biodiesel, anaerobic digestion, right? And now then there's the system of storage credits, trading that's going on, and it talks about a $50 megawatt. We are in the $20 range right now, okay?
This is
Go ahead, please. Basic question.
Sure.
It seems to me, you've got the gas, it's quite inexpensive, and the easiest way for many of us, electricity, would be through fuel cells, which can be powered by natural gas.
Yeah.
And then we don't have to distribute and generate all this extra electricity.
Well, when I was in school back in the 60s, right, fuel cells was going to be utopia. We're going to have one on every street corner. And I'm sure you will remember that too. But it hasn't happened that way, and they're still not, the stacks are still not there, right? It's just like batteries. They haven't reached the point where, unfortunately, from your own cell phone, the crazy battery dies when you need it most, right? So that's the answer to that, actually. Fuel cells are not done. They're coming, but it's not here yet. Sure. Well, and certainly, and that's being advocated, right? The gas company does promote most of this, but you must remember we are just like delivering water, we are ratepayer based, and we can't do what we want to do without permission from the CPUC, which is then directed from the governor's office, and the energies are up there. But you're right, and so it's good. This is why we have these meetings, so that you can, the thoughts are there, and then they'll percolate up. This is the mix that we have today, and this is now the mix of fuels for California, and this is the renewable mix, okay? So if you see biomass, that's the little one that you folk have the most influence on, right? The others are there. Small hydro is there, and then the rest. So those are the numbers, and that's just very late. That's November 2017. That's the latest. Okay, and that's looking at it the other way. You can see solar peaking up on the top there. The biomass is that little green thing right at the bottom, right? You just in case, just to put it in perspective, this is a wastewater treatment plant, and how natural gas is actually generated. You can see that from the digester it's removed, and then you got to take care of the hydrogen sulfide, moisture, siloxanes, which come out of your beauty stuff, and then down, and of course there's pipeline gas down here, and natural gas that you're putting in that generates electricity, and the heat goes back into the digesters to increase the digesters' output. Any questions? We'll go on. So it can, go for it.
It's not currently economically feasible to clean it up to the point of selling it to you because you can...
Not to the pipeline, but if you can use it, that'll work. So that's a classic poster child. We just help these people. So we do incentives, right? And this is San Luis Obispo's wastewater treatment plant. It's small, but it reduced his utility energy by 25%. And that's just off his own thing. That sentence at the top that tells you that this resource is an abundance of energy, including thermal, chemical, and hydraulic. And so it's now not low-hanging fruit, but it takes a little doing. These people are very willing to share how it's done. Howard Bruin there is a good friend of mine now because I've been working with him. And those stainless steel cylinders on the side are the cleanup skid, and inside is a small MAN engine and a generator system. I wanted to just put this on because obviously Huntington Beach, there are, I think, over 50 desal plants that are in some form of permitting or planning, okay, and some in building. This is Carlsbad's big RO pump. Now, I mentioned back then that if you use natural gas, electricity, transformation, and then back again and use it, there's a big difference in price. It's a 60% difference. If this one, there are 3 of these RO pumps at Carlsbad. If one of those pumps had a gas engine or a gas turbine directly coupled to it, we've looked into all of that, and we're presenting it to ID and people like that, that you could save considerably. I mean, we're talking that one 7,000 horsepower pump saving somewhere between $3 and $5 million a year because of the time use of electricity and its value. You got to remember that you got Orange County's OC Sand next door. It's very close to where you're planning to put that desal plant, or if it does go. It's the same thing to the other desal plants. So with this one at Huntington Beach, the line is already in there. It's there because it was supplying the two power plants. So these things should be studied, and it's not an either or, it's both, because that brings the reliability and the flexibility, and then the optimizing the operating cost, right? So I'll just go on. So these are the things we do. If you're planning to do anything, please give the gas company a call through Emily there, or call me direct. I'm going to leave my cards here if you want some. And then these are the numbers. I don't think you need to be bored with it, but they're considerable, right? And we do calculate incentives and give them to you. Again, rebates, the same thing, right? And we do water energy nexus. So if you save water, you save energy. I know Pierre was talking about, is it actually 17%? It may not be, but we figure that just heating water in your house and all of that 35% of the gas goes towards water heating.
I noticed there's a hot water on demand addition.
Yes.
I know it.
And if you want to learn more about that, please just go on the SoCal Gas website, and it's in there, but there's also a very good lab of all of this mounted and showing it how it works at the Energy Resource Center in Downey, right? And these are all free seminars that we're holding, and if you're going to get into this, you should just make a visit up there. And if you go on SoCalGas.com and look for the seminars, you're going to find it's just going on every day of the year, right? And very well attended, and there's a lot of instruction. It's all free, and they give you food, right? So what else can they? The only thing is you got to drive there, right? We got about 3 minutes more. So basically, I'm not going to labor all this, but there's power generation incentives. The difference between an incentive and a rebate is important. Rebate is after you've done it. They'll give you some money. The incentives is something that we're going to give you to help you to do it. So you must call us before you start doing it. Otherwise, they don't give you an incentive. They just say you're a free rider at that point. Right? There are different programs. The OPT Rule 38 is essentially that the gas company's shareholders will give you some money. There's new gas air conditioning. All of you know that your grandfathers, I'm looking around this room and I go, wow, look at all these gray heads, right? I go to the same barber as most of you, right? So.
How many have had a Cervell refrigerator?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to get to. But we couldn't, it would be hard to explain it all, except that people who have motorhomes know that you light a little pilot or you have a little electricity and you're getting cold, frozen food coming out. So it's done, and there's new technologies all coming on the market right now. It's big time, okay? I'm not going to, because we help you with air quality, because that's the Achilles heel. It shouldn't be just water energy, it should be water, energy, air quality, right? That should be the next, that's the third piece of that stool. But I think that's pretty much getting to the end. That picture there is that's Huntington Beach's booster plant, and they have electric motors and gas engines connected to the same pump, so that they can go between the two whenever it's cheaper. That is the cheapest cost per dollar per acre foot in the whole region. No, that's just a little aero engine, 80 horsepower, right? And that's their booster plant. And it's SCADA controlled, and they keep it so that whatever the cheapest prime fuel is, that's what they're using. We give you the assistance. All of, just like James, there are account executives, all of you have them, right? And you need to be talking to them. And this is showing the savings. This thing on the left is, you're talking about a capital cost of 3%, but then a cost of 90%. Now, you took that same pie and divided it over there, 12%, so 4 times to get the gas prime mover in, and then there's a big maintenance permit cost, but still the actual gas is cheap enough that there's a big savings. What that represents is for about a 300 horsepower motor, you're talking about $1 million, okay, in 10 years. So it's worth looking into, and I would urge you to do that because of the reliability and the flexibility that it gives you. And that's me. I think I made it. 9:01. Right.
Well, I do recommend going to the Downey Center. I have gone to every single seminar. In the last 10 years, I went to all of them. And that's the place where they experiment restaurant with new products. And believe me, sometimes you get food, really good food, for free. So
it's in Downey on Firestone, right opposite the Stonewood Mall, next door to Penske Toyota.
Well, this meeting is over. Thank you very much, everybody, for the attendance. Thank you, Ranjiv.